speaker has been a rare fruit grower in the valley for many years. Family member here in Chapel, California, rare fruit growers. He has spent the last 15 years experimenting, dragon fruit, and other rare fruits in his backyard. With the help of the late Tom Paulson, he has become a local expert on growing dragon fruit in the valley. Reminder, please turn on your cell phone. Otherwise, please welcome Tom Paulson.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
And starting with a nice picture, that's a dragon fruit. Just about 2 pounds. I picked it at Paul Thompson's place. He and I enjoyed the food. He was my mentor on this. I'm a long-time member of CRFG for years. I've lived here for 2 years, but Paul Thompson is a man who was interested in the Bahia. He shared a lot of his knowledge with me, and also shared his plans with me. Growing up into high, the low elevations of desert affairs presents challenges that can be rewarding. Our environment challenges both with fire and ice. A major challenge here is summer. Summer temperatures here are often 110 degrees and if it's high as 122 degrees. And that's hot. Shade must be provided. Plants or two might be protected by trees, but if you want to grow a number of plants, shade is necessary. I was given Harry Jones who was a fruit farm, and I was some of the streets front yard had a big red fruits on it. And what is this? He planted a couple of pitahaya at the base of the citrus tree, about 15 feet up in the air, had fruit on top, beautiful, looked like a Christmas decoration. This is enjoying the fruit, and there are different ways of growing the fruit. I find that different species require different densities of shade cloth. H. polyrizus, which is Hylocereus polaris, and Paul Thompson's Linus do very well with just 30 to 40% shade cloth here. If you use no shade cloth, they will die in the summer heat, no doubt about it. I find Hylocereus udatus requires 60% shade cloth. That's what the chemists are looking at for in our summer market. If you don't, the fruit smells, it looks like candle wax. And some like Paul Thompson's Venus, which is really a very nice one. Thank you. Even with 7% shade cloth, it just melts. Notice how the 20 winter. Winter can be a problem. I've been here for 32 years. This past February, temperatures have dropped to 22 degrees. It's the coldest temperatures I've recorded in my backyard, and it's really damaged a lot of my plants. It's really about 3/4 made very good fruit. That was my other story. We planted a lot of trees and have about 6 left. Just a short version. I'll give you the long version of the story. One plant, an unknown variety, did not show any damage while breaking around it froze. The plant produced a deep red fruit of very good quality. Unfortunately, it's not self-fertile. It's a good pollinator for other varieties. And this one is what I'm propagating. Plants take one of my major varieties. Temperatures also affect flowering. Flowering comes in waves. The spring flowering is very small. It's usually about May and June. And then in about end of May, early July, the peak is really extreme. This will last about mid-July. We'll start getting the monsoon. When we get the monsoon, it's not quite what they call it in Southeast Asia, but the humidity increases, the rains come, and the temperatures decline. The onset of the monsoon is followed about 2 to 3 weeks by numerous flower buds. It always happens. We get a nice rain, temperature drops, and the whole thing lights up with flower buds. The monsoon usually leaves in early September by the time the lower temperatures as fall approaches. Shade cloth protects the plants from summer sun and winter. It gives them some measure of frost protection. This winter, though, with that 22 degrees, it didn't give enough frost protection. I still lost most of my plants. I'm going to discuss irrigation now. My basic irrigation plan is flood irrigation. I open a valve in my backyard and floods my yard to about a depth of 8 inches. I do this every 2 weeks in the summer and once a week in the month, and once a month in the winter. I do it because the water's cheap. It's very easy just to run one big valve. If the plants are bearing fruit, I give them extra water, watering them weekly, except for a few days prior to picking the fruit. The fruit seems to taste better if you don't water them immediately prior to harvesting. I think do modern kind of harvesting that, probably dilute the juices a bit, and they're not quite as tasty. For fertilizer, I use ammonium sulfate. It seems to work well. It's inexpensive as far as fertilizers go. It is also useful for my citrus and my lawn. Most people say you don't need much fertilizers other than ammonium sulfate. There are a lot of minerals in the soil here naturally, but you need nitrogen. Several growers told me that high phosphate fertilizer may increase blossom formation. I've tried this also. I haven't done any control since, but I think it does help if you have some high phosphate fertilizer. I discuss vines and trellis system now. And first, I'm just going to show you, I was visiting Paul Thompson, so they got me started this. This is what he used to do, is a pole, a triangle, three wires on either side, and this is what held up the plants. And this is what I have here. You can see it says night. I'm using the same system. It's moving very nicely, lots of blossoms. There's something else I want to point out. I really like pineapples. My reasoning was, if you can grow a dragon fruit in the system, you should be able to grow pineapples. So I plant pineapples in between other things. I've got some nice couple of pineapples that comes by tomorrow, just with nice fruits about that big on them. I figure if it works for one, two work for they're not identical, but some of the climate requirements are pretty similar.
Do you use a light at night?
No.
Okay.
Oh, no. It's what whatever Mother Nature does.
Okay. And you have fertilizer and pollination?
Yes, a little bit, just a little bit. So basically, I do the same thing. I have a pole with a wooden triangle that supports 6 wide, 3 wires on either side, so a total of 6 wires. They also grow plants on a pole. In Southeast Asia, they put a pole on the ground, they put a wagon wheel on top. They have the vine grow up, then have a branch out and hang out. It looks quite nice. I've tried that. I don't use a wagon wheel though. Just take a close up the trellis system, a little pineapple over the corner. This is a pole system. I just put a pole in the ground and a couple of 2x4s and run wire around it to sort of get sort of roughly a triangular system built on top. It's not as pretty, but it works. I was just trying different systems to see what works best. Another one, I just sort of made a basic use of like a bed for it. It works also. You have to decide what's best for you, but still, I think the trellis system is my favorite. You can also grow it on the side of a tree. This is a vegetable date, and I just had it wrapped around the tree. That's my grandson who loves dragging the fruit. It was salmon and stuff.
Probably an old table and go from outside also, you can bury the pole and use just the
Right,
spines.
like I said, Doug Jones, I visited his place and he had this bit of high and big red fruit on it, 15 feet up in the tree from 2 plants in the horizontal. But this is just the date really is very nice for this because they've got this axle where the branch comes out and cracks itself in there.
And it helps support it.
It helps support it. Sometimes it gets a little high though. Just growing free. That'll be bird fodder. Flowers getting rid of them. More flowers.
Do you cover them to protect them from the birds or rodents or?
Oh, we'll get to that.
Oh,
I just want to see a nice pretty flower.
Flower.
We'll be mentioning this a little bit. You've got your stigma lobes here, the stigma style ovary. Here you've got the anthers on filaments, and that's important for certain varieties. We'll get to that later. A pole is put in the ground, put the wagon wheel on top, and as I said, that works, but it doesn't look so cute. For good flower and fruit production, also need to prune the vines. When I was visiting with Paul, he had an Israeli grower there, commercial growing, he said, the more you prune them, the better they fruit, the more fruit you get. I personally prune in January or February just because it's convenient. I can't say it's the best time, it's just when I happen to do it. And I also find that more flowers form on horizontal and drooping branches. I've never seen one on a climbing branch. Another major labor is the pollination of the flowers. Most of the varieties I grow are not self-fertile, therefore hand pollination is required to ensure a good fruit set. For commercial growers, the biggest expense aside from establishing an orchard is to pay the people who do the hand pollination. That's what the Israeli growers do this. So it's a big expense set getting them in there in the first place, but it's expensive to hire people to go around it at night, bring headlights with little canisters to collect pollen and do the hand pollination. The flowers open about sunset and close a few hours after sunrise. The pollination is therefore done at night or in the early morning. I just wear a headlamp. And in the morning I have to leave for work, so I usually can't do it at that time. First thing I do is gather the pollen. I put on the headlight and I go out in the evening after the blossom opens. I gather the pollen and put it into a plastic container and label them as to variety, which is important to know what the pollen is. For a best pollen set, I cross-pollinate pollen from a different species but same genus. If you try to do a different genus, it doesn't sometimes work well, like the Summaceus and the Hyloceus. Different species, same genus seems to work pretty well. Some species also tend to be better pollinators than others. I store the pollen in the refrigerator and it stays viable for about 8 days. And after about 8 days, usually it doesn't work very well. I've heard people trying to freeze it. I tried that once and it didn't work for me. I also have a lot of sphinx moths in the backyard. These are huge moths, also known as tomato hornworms. And in these huge eyes, I see them fluttering about in the pitahaya blossoms at night. I'm pretty sure they use some pollen because I've had some self-sterile varieties, species, which I haven't been able to pollinate because out of time, so they still set fruit. And I'm pretty sure it's all those sphinx moths out there. If you ever shine a light on, they have these huge eyes, looks like a demon looking back there.
And horns.
Yes. This natural rank bats and moths are the usual pollinators. I also have several self-fertile varieties that set fruit routinely without any hand pollination. I noted that in these self-fertile varieties that grow, that the anthers are in very long filaments, and the anthers are already touching the stigma lobes as the flower opens. This was both good and bad, which I'm used to cross-pollination. Whereas in the self-fertile varieties, I've only got 3 or 4, but every single one of them, the filaments are very long, and the anthers are actually touching the stigma lobes and see pollen there as the flowers open. And then to some cross-pollination, I was trying to get some self-fertile varieties and good varieties that are not self-fertile. What I usually do is take the pollen from the self-fertile variety and go to the non-self-fertile variety. Although I suppose you could go out in the middle and not trim off all the anthers before they open, but I don't know if I could do more work than I have to. But I may have a picture of that here also. Here you can see the short filaments and the anthers are way away from the stigmas, and self-sterile anyway, so it doesn't matter. We were talking about birds earlier, we'll get to that just a little bit here. Selamocereus. When you do pollinate, the fruit usually ripens in about 40 to 45 days after pollination. It depends a little on the weather and the species we're working with. I find when the fruit attains its full color, it's basically ripe. It might get a little riper next to it, but waiting much longer, that does you no good. It's about as good as it's going to get when it has full color. The quality doesn't improve much from that. You can eat the fruit right or keep it. Obviously, you want to store it on occasion. The fruit usually keeps about 1 week at room temperature before losing quality. It can be kept about 2 weeks if you store it between 50 and 58 degrees. This is for the Hyloceus varieties. Cold damage occurs when it's below 50 degrees, and most refrigerators are below 50 degrees, so if you store in the refrigerator, it actually loses quality. Selamocereus megalampus, however, can be stored down to about 42 degrees, so it will take the refrigerator temperature. So the Hyloceus varieties won't. When the food is stored, it uses water, acidity, and sugar. The acidity usually drops faster than sugar and the flavor changes. Even though the sugar level may be down, it may actually taste a little sweeter because the acid goes down fast. The water content of the food also changes when you store it. Cold storage for about 10 days at those temperatures, you use about 3% of the water content of the food. You lose about 5% of the water content that looks visibly damaged. Acidity in the fruit affects the taste. A sweet fruit without acid is generally not very tasty, like a fruit that has some acid that gives it balance. The pH of the Hyloceus fruits is usually between about 4.5 and 5.5, depending on the acidity. The titratable acidity, which is acidity, is about 0.11 to about 0.34%. I said for flavor, you want some acidity. For comparison, the acidity of a nice cherry tomato is around 0.7%, so it's a lot less acid than cherry tomato. Best test of fructose to taste it. If you like it, you like it. Now, there's some objective ways of testing the fruit also. We'll discuss that a little bit. The sugars in the fruit are mostly glucose, fructose, and a small amount of sucrose. And a percentage also matters, like fructose tastes about twice as sweet as fructose if it's the same concentration of fruit. Sucrose falls in the middle. If I have a nice variety, I taste it. Okay, so I was going to do something exactly to the Brix reading. What's this little device? Probably many of you know what it is. It's called a refractometer. You put a little bit of juice down here, or it's into a light source. You can really decrease Brix. The juice is not just juice, it has dissolved salts, sugar, acids, all sorts of things. And it bends light. Usually light forms lever direction, bends light to the left. We have isomers which move in the opposite direction, but most of the living things are to the left. What you do is you measure the degree of bending of the light. And that's called the Brix rate. It reflects the amount of dissolved solids. They did some interesting work at UC Davis in California. They took the Brix readings, then they measured the actual amount of sugar. They did a whole bunch of different red and white flesh varieties. They came up with a little diagram there where I can tell that if the Brix reading is 12, it's 40 milligrams of sugar per gram of fruit weight. It goes up about 25 milligrams for every 2 points of fruit weight. So I've got a little graph so I can see if it's a Brix reading 90 milligrams of sugar per gram of fruit. Got all this. If anybody's interested, I can show you a little graph later if you're interested in something like that. Now this is only true of dragon fruit at the time. You take a grape, the Brix reading will be a different amount of sugar. It has different constituents in it.
So that can be used on any fruit?
On any fruit, but the scale here is only good for dragon fruit or
I see,
pitaya.
okay.
You always see people out there, the people who do this commercial, they'll have the refractometer, they're doing Brix readings. So, and for grapes, it will be a different scale than what is for this. The color in the pigmented varieties is due to beetles, which is a red-violet pigment, which is a powerful antioxidant that's related to the pigment in beets. Mother Nature doesn't always create new things, so it recycles things. So the pigment in beets is in two different pigments here in the red varieties of dragon fruit. I'd like to discuss the varieties that grow in Arizona. I've generally been growing 9S and 3S, which are hybrids created by Paul Thompson, who is most used with the Sierra 2 founders. And I grow self-fertile varieties of Hylocereus undatus. I also grow a few vines of Selenocereus megalanthus, which is also a self-fertile variety. Selenocereus is self-fertile and is one of the best tasting pitaya. It has yellow skin, white flesh, and seeds that are larger than the other varieties I grow. The flowers of this variety come in the fall, and they take about 6 months to ripen, as opposed to about 40 to 45 days for most of the Hylocereus varieties. The fruit is smaller than most other varieties and has numerous little spines which go into your skin, which you have to rub off. They're not too difficult to rub off, but you have to do that. The vine also seems to grow slower than most other varieties that grow in Arizona. I again mentioned this to Paul Thompson. I said, the Selenocereus does not grow well here. It's very slow. It's because they don't like the soil here. They like a very sandy, loamy soil, and then well, it's a big bowl, and then I did that. I don't like digging big bowls. So I did this, I took this 9S variety, which really does well in our soil, and I grafted the Selenocereus megalanthus onto it. It's not that difficult to do, but it's pretty, you just have to split the core, line things up. And it took off and did very well for me, and I did not have to dig any big hole. Now back to the Hylocereus varieties. I picked the Hylocereus fruits at the end of August to about mid-January. And the Selenocereus megalanthus, the yellow fruit variety, I picked from end of April until May. The summer fall fruits that I was used were about 250 to 500 grams, although sometimes I get something up to about a kilogram, but not sure I'll get a few like that too. We also have pests that compete with me for birds are the major problem. They attack kills the fruit and the ant skin and they finish off the job. Well, I'm doing currently spraying things with blue towels and just use a little clothespin on the lawn. I found clear towels, they try to peck holes in the skin, but the blue towels seem to discourage them. Just something you found by chance. if I didn't try and protect it with something, then I'd probably done it all. My first try was with styrofoam cups. I'd split them, make a little hole in the back and put around it. The birds usually find a way of getting around that.
You've got
It's
brown
nice to
bags.
them, yeah.
Have you tried brown bags?
I've tried brown bags too, but then I can't see the food drying as easily, and they peck holes with brown bags too. I found that, I think it's smart. They've got a pretty good learning curve there. And that's the way I hold on to them. And I said, I don't do this anymore. I did that one season, and probably those little blue towels, I just wrap it up a little close, and it seemed to come off. And of course, you have to decide whether it's the white, so I'm going to put the off on it when I think it's going to change color pretty soon, so I know what's what. That's when you pick the food. This is the fun part. Going out at night for the first couple of years, so it was sort of fun, but after that gets real old. This is the fun part. We have an H. polyrisis, a 9S, and an H. indavis there. Here we cut it open.
Wow.
Very pretty.
That's a Hyloceros indavis. That is a 9S from Paul Thompson's hybrid. It's one of the best tasting around, and it does very well in Arizona. That's an H. polyrisis. And you can make nice fruit salads out of these anima salads.
Just a comment, I believe that 9S also is called Dark Star. And
The only one I knew that Paul himself did was the 3S, which he called Delight.
Delight, yeah.
It's also called other things, the 9S. Crangon calls it Arizona Red. There are many names for some of these, it just depends who gets a hold of them. And sometimes you have 3 fruits or vines with them. It's all the same thing, just different people gave them different names and you acquire them. And I have little tastings too. We tried, this was a hybrid I developed, didn't turn out that great, it wasn't that bad. Sequence of Delight number 6, 14 pieces. We recently have people do flavor testings on it. A friend of mine showed some of the food off. They're really some of the prettiest fruits around.
They are pretty.
Yeah, if you could eat looks, this would be on the top of the list.
Right.
And that's a Megalanthus. It's a much smaller fruit, but it's very, very tasty. It has a high sugar content. It's probably, maybe more so this is the best of the dragon fruits. And that's good. They've got very large seeds compared to the Hyloceros. Very tasty. And this is what I would do when I had my full production, where I had about 60, 70 plants. I would pick that about every 4 or 5 days or so. And then you might want to sell them. We had too many to eat. I eat them, my grandchildren eat them, we all love them. But then I found a lady from Thailand. She says, "We grow this." She says, "I want to sell them at a farmer's market." So I bring them to her and line them up at other farmers markets. And she had no problem saying, I stayed around one day, and in about 30 minutes, they're all gone. The demand exceeds the supply.
Does she make a jam from them also?
She just sells them.
Oh, okay. Can they be made from the jam?
You can do a lot of things with them. They didn't make them into wine. The Festival of Fruits last year did dragon fruit wine, which was really pretty tasty.
How many fruits does a single plant do?
It depends. You can have a huge plant with many dozens of fruit, or you can have a small one with just 2 or 3 fruit. There's so many variables there. There are a lot of variables there, but you can get quite a bit of fruit all over. I'd like to say a few words about propagation. If you wish to plant it, which is identical to the parent, I take cuttings from the parent line. The best place to cut is at the joint. If you cut in the middle of the stem, oftentimes they'll rot because it's just so wet there. I take it at the joint, I'll let it cure for about 3 days, then apply a little rooting hormone and place it in a pot. Best results are from cuttings taken from plants that are actively growing. Dormant vines don't root that well unless it's in the springtime, just to get it to get the growth flush, and I find we can root them down pretty good also. Bottom heat helps root, especially if the weather is cool. I've got a little heating pad that I use to get them to root that was on the site. It can take from several weeks for several months for the roots to form, assuming that the cutting doesn't rot, it will grow. You see lots of active growth here, pretty make sure it's rooted. Sometimes you can get some growth with no roots, but it's really growing vigorously, it's got roots. The potting you may use is generally just super stowage and get that Home Depot and add perlite to it. And that's what they use. And it seems to work well. Probably there's something better out there, but I've had no problems with this. I also occasionally propagate from a seed. I do this when I wish to produce hybrids. I take pollen from the pollen and transfer it to the stimulus of the chosen flower. I let the flower open and I remove the seed from the fruit and plant it. The seed germinates best if it's in warm soil. If it's cool at the time, I'm going to use the heating pad. This is the one time ants can be your friend. If you know where there's some ants, the ants are everywhere. They take the food, you clean up a little bit, you put it in the ants, and maybe on a little paper bowl. Come back a day later, you just find seeds there. You don't have to really clean. I like things that are not so labor intensive. I find it takes about 2 to 5 years to go from seedling to taking your fruit. Usually do it 3 to 4. Occasionally it may take 5, just depends. And hopefully the fruit of your newly developed plant will have the characteristics you are looking for. Like I said, the other way to do this whole thing, grafted high, not with the new variety, but if you got something that just doesn't like the soil, grafting is not that difficult. And for the prepared part of this, I was supposed to say, I wish to close this by saying that growing thin and high in the low elevations of Arizona presents challenges, but with perseverance and some luck, especially in regard to weather, can be literally fruitful. That's fun.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Questions? Yes.
Did I hear you say you dropped the Solanasterius to a 9S?
Yes, to Donis. That's up in Donis with a higher success. No problem with the graft. It grows very well. Basically, you have to split the cores so that you line them up for maybe a couple of inches. You can basically make a saddle graft, tie them together, and they do very well with that. I find it's easier to graft that than some of the regular fruits we see graft. It's not that difficult.
So, how many are you, how many plants do you have now? What are you limited to?
Well, last year I had about 75. If you want full-size ones right now, maybe about 7 or 8. The freeze, it got down to 22, and it really stayed low. And all of them were damaged or killed except for one, which shows exceptional vigor. It looked like it was still growing in southern Florida, and it was 90 degrees. I mean, it wasn't touched. So what I'm doing now, maybe trying to go that way and make life fight Mother Nature. I just wish it were self-fertile, otherwise it would be just wonderful. It has a red fruit, fairly good size, good taste, good for excreting. Very sturdy. Seems to take the heat very well.
Last couple
if it were self-fertile, I think this would be about the ideal one. It just isn't, though.
Last couple of winters, we've had some, I lost 2 ficus trees, one in the front yard, one in the backyard. Just got hit 2 winters in a row, just like you.
Right, 2007 was bad here, and also in February of 2011, and it just couldn't take it.
Al, which Solanasterius species do you have? You mentioned Megalanthus. Are you using any others?
No, just that's the only one I have right now.
Do you know, I don't remember reading about it. Have people used the grandifloras for fruit, for pollen?
I don't know. I wish I could. Any other questions? Yes.
Sorry, I came in a bit late. I'm interested also in the Peruvian apple cactuses.
Cirrus peruviana.
Cirrus peruvianus, and I heard that they had a breeding program in Israel where they were breeding improved fruiting varieties.
Yeah, Miss Rossi and Nerd in Israel have published some articles. You probably wouldn't want up on the internet, where they published both those and Pitahaya, those headed Pitahayas. I've grown Cirrus peruviana here. My biggest problem is the birds. I had to wrap newspaper, and although they're good, I don't think they're as good as the dragon here, and it just doesn't work the effort as much as concerned. But certainly, I think we could like it. It's a lot easier to grow. We'll take the full sun. It takes more cold.
Are there any varieties, improved varieties available here in the States?
I can't answer that. I'm not sure. Do you know, Leo?
I don't know of any.
You recommend any source of information, more information like that?
Go on the internet.
Yeah.
Internet, you find lots of stuff. And also the old issues of the food product, probably 2-3 times a year, you'll find cars going something like this. Mesa, downtown Mesa, so Mesa and McDonald, Main Street McDonald. Anything else? Okay.
What's the what's the name of the darkest variety that can grow okay in this?
I'm not sure what the darkest variety is. Hyloceus polymyces is very dark.
Do you have, in my own plants, I see occasionally the plant just starts rotting. The core doesn't rot, but the flesh on the outside turns brown and it gets really soft to the point where you can wash it off with the hose. I think it's some kind of bacterial infection.
Well, they also get porkiness is another disease that's called. But by me, they usually don't do that unless it's really hot.
Almost all of our commercial plants in cultivation, garden plants, are virus. And in some climates, they just don't do well. I mean, the sort of melting that you described just doesn't really happen here. But I know that in California, it does happen quite a bit.
Anything else? Enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you.